Tragedy happens all the time. You get your heart broken, your laptop gets stolen, you fail the audition. Whatever it is, you might have been advised to be stoic about it. We have this idea that being stoic means being emotionally detached and not letting life get you down. And that's interesting because Stoicism with a capital S is a philosophical word. Stoicism is literally ancient. It's a school of thought from the Hellenistic period. That's after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and after Socrates, Plato and Aristotle, but before the Roman Empire. There were a lot of early Stoics and they didn't always agree, and we only have fragments of what some of them wrote, so what I'm about to tell you might be a little bit distilled down or historically contentious. We begin in ancient Athens, and the reason it's called Stoicism is because one of its founders, Zeno of Kition, used to teach under a covered walkway in the Athenian agora, the public square in town, and the Greek word for one of these covered walkways was stoa. So why did the Stoics think that you shouldn't be emotional and shouldn't let misfortune upset you? And did they really think that, or is that kind of a simplification? Well, in order to understand the Stoics, we need to understand their metaphysics. In order to understand the Stoics, we have to understand their metaphysics, their picture of what the world was like and what exists in it. They thought that matter, stuff, was all that existed. Things like time and space and the meaning of words subsist. They depend on matter for their existence, but they don't really exist on their own. Despite being pretty materialist, the Stoics did believe in a god, but it wasn't a god outside the universe, and it wasn't a personal god like a lot of modern religions had. They thought that God was in the universe, everywhere and at all times. Matter, stuff, just exists on its own. But God is the organizing principle that orders all matter and causes everything, even the tiniest event, to happen according to its design. God for the Stoics was less like a person and more like the Force. God is made of pneuma, which translates as breath, which is a fiery element that pervades all things and organizes and orders everything. You have a little bit of pneuma in you. Your rational soul/mind is made of it. In that way, you are like a little piece of God. The Stoics were pretty deterministic in their metaphysics as well. God is maximally rational, and therefore it orders the universe maximally rationally. And if the universe is ordered in a maximally rational way, there should be and could be no deviation from that perfect plan. None of this free will or branching realities stuff here, buddy. By the way, if you've studied any Christian theology, which I have, you might recognize that pneuma is quite similar to the early Christian idea of logos, or the word, the embodied will of God. In Christianity, logos gets made into a person, Jesus, and it's only one aspect of God. You might also recognize the importance of breath, as in breathing life into things. These were not new ideas when the Church Fathers thought of them. They were drawing on, among other things, Stoicism. Being a Stoic isn't just about believing their metaphysics, it's a way of life. You don't believe Stoicism, you live it. It's supposed to be a manual for the good life. The good life is one that is happy. But happiness for the Stoics doesn't mean pleasure, or even necessarily what we mean by happiness. That might sound a little confusing, but the problem arises from translating the Greek word eudaimonia. A lot of Greek philosophies, including Stoicism, have eudaimonia as their end goal. It's usually translated as happiness, but human flourishing might be a more accurate sense of what it really means. Eudaimonia is whatever the good life consists in. A lot of Greeks thought that the purpose of philosophy was to identify specifically what eudaimonia was and also how to achieve it. Eudaimonia for the Stoics meant a life filled with virtue. And the only virtue, they thought, the only thing that was always good without any qualification was being rational. Okay, so we have to be rational, but how do we know what being rational involves? Well, God designed the universe perfectly rationally. So in order to be rational and therefore virtuous and therefore live the good life, all we have to do is accord our will with the universe. This includes, but is not limited to, attending to the needs you were born with. God designed you to need food and water and shelter and companionship, so accord your will with nature. Seek those things out. It also includes a certain amount of attending to the needs of others. Humans are social creatures. The concerns of others matter to us. That's part of what being social means. So don't neglect the needs of other people. There is a lot of flexibility built into Stoic ethics. Sometimes you might have to make trade-offs, or sometimes actions that look irrational in certain circumstances can actually be the rational thing to do in others. There isn't one hard and fast formula for living the Stoic life. There's this characterization of Stoics as emotionless, and that does have some basis in the philosophy. The Stoics thought that you should be without passions, parthe, literally things that you undergo, as opposed to things that you do. You can't choose most of your emotions, they just happen to you. Someone breaks your heart and you get sad. You don't choose for that to happen, it just does. But the Stoics said that your soul is made of pneuma, this fiery, controlling substance, and therefore you should be in control of your emotions. They shouldn't be in control of you, and that will involve curbing your passions. It's kind of like being Spock. Spock does have emotions. You can hurt his feelings. He's not a robot, but he's a Vulcan, and he thinks that he should control his emotions rather than let his emotions control him. The Stoics thought in particular that you need to control your desire, your pleasure, and your fear, since they are very good at carrying your reason away and being difficult to rein in. They are the most irrational passions. You can still have some emotions, like benevolence towards other people. That's appropriate, that's in line with nature, or even a small amount of joy. You don't have to be totally cold-hearted. So we see how the idea of the detached Stoic, who doesn't let things bother them, does have some purchase in the philosophy. When bad things happen to a Stoic, they don't let their emotions control them, they rein them in, and they realize that the universe is maximally rational, and therefore that they should just go with it. Stoicism was a pervasive idea. It became quite popular in ancient Rome. Caesar Augustus, Cicero, and Brutus, that is, Stabby Brutus, who killed Julius Caesar, all had a fondness for Stoicism at one stage or another in their lives. We've already seen how it affected early Christian thought. The medieval Christian idea of natural law also has some roots in Stoicism. Some later Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, enjoyed a revival in Victorian England and contributed to the idea of the emotionally reserved, stiff upper lip Brit, which Britain is still dealing with today, mainly thanks to the work of my dad. You might also be aware of the supposed dichotomy between reason and emotion, this quite sexist dichotomy which has done a lot of damage over history and which is still a part of patriarchal thinking today. Yeah, that has roots in Stoicism too. Of course, if you don't believe the Stoic metaphysics, it might now be a little bit more difficult for you to be Stoic with a small s about your problems. Sorry. What do you guys think of Stoicism? Can you think of any arguments for it that maybe don't rely on their metaphysics? Next time we could either talk about hedonism, or we could do should prisoners get the vote? So leave a comment telling me what you'd like to see next time, and for more philosophical videos every Friday, please subscribe. This episode was sponsored by audible.com. If you go to audibletrial.com/philosophytube, then you can get a free 30-day trial of their audiobook service that you can cancel anytime, and also a free audiobook. Last time we talked about an analogy between the law and comic books. So let's see what you guys had to say. Patrick Strait said that the episode was quite Eurocentric in that it focused on common law rather than other forms of law like civil or Sharia law. And yes, you are quite correct to point that out. The philosophy of law, as it is taught in most Western universities, including the one I went to, does tend to focus on Anglo-American law. And that's probably mainly because it's mainly written by English speakers, and therefore that's the form of law that they are the most familiar with. It doesn't all do that, but most of it does, and sometimes they are challenged on that basis. People do say to these philosophers, maybe this has a narrower focus than you were thinking because it is also Anglo-American. I don't think that Ronald Dworkin, the philosopher we were discussing, would necessarily have to change anything he said in light of that. He could just put it within a qualifier, but yeah, you are definitely quite correct to point that out. Ian Dirk extended the analogy between the law and comic books by saying that sometimes the law can struggle to accommodate new things into its comic book continuity. Like, just to take a local example, copyright law is struggling to accommodate some YouTube videos like Let's Players and struggling to figure out whether they're actually transformative or not. Just like comic books can sometimes struggle to accommodate a new character or a new idea without raising a whole bunch of questions about how they fit into the continuity. I don't really have a reply to that comment. I just wanted to tell you I thought it was really, really clever and I enjoyed reading it, so thanks. Tyler Graham asked, what happens if a judge makes a decision that is out of line with the law's comic book continuity? Well, what you've hit on there is something that the realistic nihilist and Orsva patriarch said slightly more explicitly, which is that Dworkin says that when judges make decisions, they need to have a decision that fits with the continuity of the law and the previous cases, that's called fit, and is also a good judgment on its own. It's fair and it accommodates all the relevant legal principles, that's called substance. And his critics have sometimes asked him, how are we supposed to weigh these two things? If we've got two possible verdicts that the judge could give, one has more fit, less substance, one has more substance, less fit, how are we supposed to choose between them? And this is supposed to be a big, big problem for him. I have defended him in the past. I don't fully agree with all of what he says, but I do think he could come back on this point. I said in an essay once that he could prioritise substance, because if he prioritises that, then that will paint the law in a better light. That will portray the law as being an institution that learns from its mistakes rather than just slavishly repeating them. And I think that would work better given what he thinks the purpose of the law is. Chloe Fisher had a similar response, and they are actually a student of law, so that was very interesting and nice to see. They also said that the ideal judge that Dworkin imagines to make these decisions could not exist because nobody could have infinite time and infinite patience. Well, yes, you are correct that no such person could exist, and Dworkin does anticipate that objection and address it. The thing is, the ideal judge isn't really super important for his theories. The ideal judge is there not as an illustration, it's slightly more than that, but the point of the ideal judge is as a mechanism to explain how legal decisions could be made. He says that when a judge makes a decision, there could only be one correct answer, and that is the important bit. There can only be one correct resolution to a legal dilemma. And rather than just leave it there, he then says, the correct answer is whatever the ideal judge would say. It's just a way of suggesting a mechanism by which that one correct answer could be found. But the important thing is that there could be only one. Brett McMullen and Max Schneider asked for a little bit of clarification on why there can be only one correct answer. Well, Dworkin thinks that the law is supposed to coerce people. That is the point of the law. And if the law returned two equally good but contradictory verdicts, then it couldn't coerce anybody. It couldn't say to somebody, you have an obligation to do this, if by its own admission it would be fine if the person did not do that and did something else instead. And that's not just a bad or an inconvenient consequence that he wants to avoid talking about. He thinks that conceptually it would not make sense for the law to do that, because he thinks that the law has this built-in purpose of coercion. If whatever system we were dealing with returned two contradictory verdicts, then whatever that system is, it ain't the law, or a mistake has been made somewhere. So it's not just a bad consequence he wants to avoid, he actually thinks it would not make sense for the law to do that. That's all we've got time for this week. Next week there's going to be a very special video on artificial intelligence, so come back for that and I will see you then. Bye!